tell you exactly how the name came up. I was at a contest like at like 67, 68 in Newport, Rhode Island. I still remember. And the announcer was Brad Stoner, who was a really good surfer. And he got he was announcing and he called my name. And he goes, Peter Panagiotis. He goes, forget it, Peter Pan, get up here. And that was it. And ever since then, I was named Peter Pan. Nobody could pronounce the long Greek name, so they started calling me Peter Pan, Peter Pan. And then it just got like that, and then I ended up with that Hobie model, and they just said Peter Pan Slug, and that was it. I started surfing in 1963 in Narragansett, Rhode Island. It was during the Beach Boys craze. And my friends dragged me down to the beach even though I couldn't swim. And I still can't swim too good. But I like surfing, even though I don't like swimming. I never look down, I never look, I don't like to look around the water. The first couple of boards we just rented at Goldie's surf shop on the Narragansett Town Beach. And the first one I ever rented was like an old Hanson pop-out, and then an old Weber pop-out real bad. And we rode those for a while, and we just kept renting them. And actually we ended up, me and my friend, split for one for $100, $50 each, and we bought the board and shared it for about 2 years. It took me a couple of years, probably 2 years before I was consistently catching waves and standing up, because no one taught anyone how to surf at that time. No one wanted to teach anybody how to surf because they wanted the waves to themselves. So we were out struggling. And then we always surfed at the same beach, Narragansett Town Beach, over and over and over. So like the other breaks were all reefs and points, and I was like totally lost. I paddled out and I had no clue how to catch the wave at the point. I remember sitting at Matunic Point for like 6 hours one day, and I could not catch a wave because I didn't understand that point break. And I'd be paddling for the shoulder and I would never catch anything. There was no surfing suits at that time, so we had to use these really bad diving suits, these two-piece suits, and they leaked, and the boots were really bad and the gloves, and we just thought it was normal to be in pain when you surfed in cold water. My parents lived right next to the beach because they finally got sick of driving me to the beach. We lived in Cranston, which is about 45 minutes, and they just moved to the beach like in 1968. So, but then when I moved back I moved to New York for a while and worked there. I used to surf in New York for I did that for 8 years. And when I moved back to Rhode Island, I moved to Pawtucket. I designed a board called the Magnum, and the first batch of boards, they put my whole name on it. And I said, why did you do that? Nobody's ever heard of that. And they have the long Greek name on it. I said, you got to get that out. So, then they finally changed it. They put Peter Pan because no one recognizes my name. The Slug came about as strictly as a contest weapon, because the waves stink almost 99% of the time when there's a surfing contest. So I had to come up with some kind of a scheme that was fair, that was in the rule book, and I wanted something that I could float on and catch waves, no matter how bad the waves were. So I went to California and I went over what I wanted with Mickey Munoz. That was the first, because he was shaping for Hobie at the time. This was like in the 70s. And we came up with this big, fat, thick board. And I tried to make it as simple as I could, so the least mistakes as possible could be made in a contest. One fin, round tail, round rail, so it go through slop, flat bottom, so it'll ride in nothing. And we went through three designs before I came up with the one that worked. It didn't have a thick, wide nose. It had a narrow nose, but it was fat. And this way I could nose ride to the beach. So I came up with this perfect cheating machine. And I had a few made, and they worked really good in contests. People hate them. So the first thing they do is go, oh no, there's a slug. And that's how I got the word. They kept calling it slug. And Rick Hazard came up with a name at Hobie. And he said, this board is so disgusting that I'm going to call it a slug. He said, because it's really ugly. So he goes, and he said, I'm going to name it a Peter Pan Slug. And I said, fine, I don't care what you do. I said, just make the board. So they started making boards, and then more and more people started realizing that the board works. And they started using them in contests. And then after a while, like, you go to a contest and then everyone would have a slug. And I started making them in different sizes, like little baby slugs for little kids so they could win, and bigger slugs for adults to win. And then we had longboard slugs made with big fat ones so people could ride them in longboard contests. So that's how the whole slug thing came about. And it just became a monster. So now, like, people go, oh no, the first thing they do is whine when they see a slug come up at the beach, which I think is great. And the board works. I try to make it so it works in good waves, and of course there is disadvantages. If it's sucking out and it's really hollow, a slug will not work. But then you should have a shorter board anyway. But very rarely is it sucking out and hollow in a contest. It's usually 1 foot and mushy. So that's why most of the time slugs do work. I actually started working in a surf shop in 1967 for Spicer, Narragansett surf shops. This was the first block of like surf shops in New England, and they had like 5 of them, and I ran the one in Narragansett. And then in 1972 they closed, and that was like the last surf shop that shut. And the only way I could get Hobie surf was I had started surfing for Hobie like in '67, was I had to call Hobie directly. And so he finally said, why don't you just, you know, start selling them, selling them out of your garage, because there was like no shops at all in Narragansett. So I started selling them out of my father's garage, and it started to get crazy. People would be coming to the garage like every day just about trying to get stuff. So he said, I think you guys better, you better go open up a surf shop. So in 1975, I went to Wakefield, and I looked around, and I got a partner, Dave Levy. I used to surf with him, and we opened up the Watershed. And we ran the Watershed for like 25 years. And then I just got sick of it. Just like too much aggravation. And what happened was we closed the Watershed, and then I saw this spot like right near the beach. The problem with the Watershed is it was too far away. It was 2 miles away from the beach, and no one that's at the beach wants to drive 2 miles. No matter how much I advertised, they just stopped coming. There was too many surf shops. So I had the opportunity to get this little spot, which is 2 blocks from the Narragansett Town Beach, 2 years ago, and I jumped on it. And I made a deal with my son. I said, if you run the store, it's your store, I'll get the building. And I said, I don't want to deal with the store anymore. I said, I'll deal with all the hype and the lessons and everything else, but I don't have anything to do with the financial end of the store. I've had it. And my son wanted to name it Gansett Juice because in like 1980, I came up with a t-shirt design called Gansett Juice. And I made it like a bottle, like a logo for a beer bottle. And we used it because the Hawaiians were saying they had Hawaiian juice. New Jersey said they had New Jersey juice on the waves and all this baloney. So I made up Gansett Juice. Our surfer heroes were probably the local guys that had first started, which was like Will Needs and, you know, Dennis Tully and, you know, the Will Sanford. These guys were like the guys that first started surfing in the early 60s. Goldie, Howie Goldsmith, he had all the surf shops. Because we basically, it was just like a beach community. We really didn't go outside of that. And then we started surfing in contests around like 1967, and that's where we started to learn who the, you know, the better surfers were. The people that stand out to me, for me, in the Surfing Hall of Fame are Doc Couture, who was the head of the Eastern Surfing Association, and he was in the first group, and he died. I was really good friends with him, and he did so much for surfing. He did more for surfing on the East Coast than anybody else. He made surfing on the East Coast popular. And, you know, people forget, you know, Doc was in the background, but Doc did all the work. And as far as surfing becoming a legitimate sport on the East Coast, Gary Proper is #1 on my list, GP. And he always will be. He was my idol, and he still is. And, you know, he did the most for surfing on the East Coast. He made surfing popular, and he made it so you could be proud to be an East Coast surfer, because he went and, you know, he surfed so well, and he was like the first person from the East Coast that went to the West Coast and did good. And, you know, those are the 2 people that stand out more than anything else to me, Doc Couture and Gary Proper.